My name's Jon, surname Jagger, no relation, and I'm 32 years old in Hex. And my background is sort of the curly bracket languages, but for 17 years now I've been working on my own as a consultant trainer, sort of, whatever the latest buzz is. Yeah. We're going to be actually coding, so I'm glad lots of people have brought laptops. To make best use of the time, I really would like it if you could get into pairs, a minimum of pairs. If you want to do a 3, that's fine as well. But if everyone does this individually, number one, the learning is going to be diminished. And number two, we're going to spend a long, long time doing reviews and not get a benefit from having as many iterations as we might. Okay? So I'm going to sort of roughly let yourself organise that. So obviously, if you're two of you sitting next together and you've both got a laptop, it's fine for them both to be connected to the internet. You know, one of them can Google stuff if you want to figure something out. But if when there's a pair, only one of the pair on the laptop is actually using the Cyber-dojo site, as I will describe shortly. Okay, that would be great. Now normally when I start these sessions, I do a quick demo at the front, so you can see how the actual site works. I think I'm going to do a really shortened version of that, because I'm going to try a different start. So if you could just watch at the front now, and not type anything on your keyboards, that would be great. How does it work? Normally, if you wanted to do a Cyber-dojo, you go to the main public site, which has a URL which is the same as the name of the product, of the application itself. This is a public server. It can get quite heavily loaded at times, so I've just literally 10 minutes ago spun up a new server. So I guess the first thing we'll do, if we could all just check that you can get to that IP address. I haven't bothered subdomaining it. 35, 184, 45, 187.
You just guessed it.
Yep. Guest network access is one way of doing it. I can see someone's there already. Good. Someone else? Yeah. Looking good. So things are looking good. Obviously, if one of you is struggling and there's a pair of you, the other one can try. Okay, so again, please don't type anything on your keyboards. Once you've verified you can get that page, just watch me at the front. Okay? So I'm going to do a quick demo. How does it work? You set up a session, and then the first choice you have to make is which language you'd like to practice your session, use in your session. There's a plugin architecture using Docker. Lots of people have supplied lots of different languages. I haven't done half of these. Phil Nash recently did some for Swift, which is nice. Hands up who knows Java? Hands up who knows C#? C++? Okay, it looks like it's going to be C#. Okay. But if you know Java, then you know C# and Java is basically the same language, right? Yeah. Then you pick your test framework. Once you pick your language, you have to pick your test framework. As you'll see, testing is quite tightly integrated to the way that we'll be doing this. And then you select your exercise. And the classic first exercise is FizzBuzz. If I can find it, there it is. And then you set it up. And then you've got basically a choice here. If you're practicing on your own, you could just click Start Programming straight away. Yeah? But if we're practicing together as a team, which is what the intention is, then all we need to know is this hex ID. And again, I'll tell you how to do that when we get to that point. But for now, we're just doing a demo. So again, no one type anything. Still, just watch me at the front, okay? I've done this before. I know where the problems lie, right? So an important part of the design of Cyber-dojo is that you don't log in. There's no username login. There's anonymity. But we have to have identity so that we can do a review. And so the way that I've built that is that there are 64 animals, and the server will randomly assign any participating laptop an animal. So I've been randomly assigned a mouse. So I'm going to be the mouse. And then you get this environment here, which is deliberately, as I said in my sort of 20-second pitch, not an IDE. as I briefly hinted at, and it's written in the notes, an IDE is designed to optimize helping you go faster. All kinds of great features. We don't necessarily want to go faster. Often when we're practicing, we want to go slowly. We want to go more deliberately. You hear this idea of deliberate practice. Well, that's the idea, deliberation on what we're doing, for example. So by default, you don't have color syntax highlighting, for example. There's no compile button. There's virtually nothing except the ability to hit the test button. Or occasionally make a new file, rename an existing file, or delete a file. Yeah? If you some people really struggle with this. They have quite a strong reaction to it. Okay? I had one guy who had Asperger's syndrome, for example, and he found it quite uncomfortable, which is fair enough. Okay? But I'm just warning you, it is deliberately simple. But if it's too much for you, if you click this button at the bottom here, you can turn color syntax highlighting on. Okay? It's up to you. How does it work? Basically, there's an instructions file. You select that one. That'll tell you how to proceed. Yeah? And then anytime you want to, you can hit the test button. All of the code gets sent to the server. The server spins up a Docker container, puts your files into that, runs your code, grabs the output, pattern matches the output, and determines whether it passed or not. So it's a standard coloring. Red means the tests ran, but at least one of them failed. And you get the output from the run, and then you can fiddle around and make changes. So in this case, we can change that code there, run the tests again. Same thing happens, we get a green traffic light. Yeah. And the other thing that can happen is if you make a typo, and it doesn't even compile, then I just decided to use the amber traffic light for that. Yeah. And basically that is it. You then have to use your best judgment and go slowly, thinking about quality rather than finishing, follow the instructions, and try and do things in a test-driven fashion. There's no tricks, yeah, and I'm in the room. I can act as your customer if anything is unclear in terms of requirements. Okay? Any questions about anything so far? No? Okay. So, as I said, just as a different startup, because I like to do things a bit differently, I'm going to do this one. But nice that we get a little bit of Java as well. So I'm going to set this one up in a minute, and this will be just a practice for you to get used to the environment, basically. Yeah. In this practice session, which is based on the game Countdown, if you're familiar with the TV show Countdown, you'll be given an instructions file which lists about half a dozen Java keywords. And your task is to write code in the file that you're directed to write the code in, to use all of those keywords in the smallest possible program. Okay? When you hit the test button, the output that you get back will tell you whether your Java compiled, and if it did compile, it will also tell you the score that you get, smaller program, bigger score. Okay? So it's just a bit of fun. It's not, don't by any means think that you're trying to write good Java here. That's not the idea, right? It's the most horrible Java, necessarily, potentially, as long as it's the smallest bit of Java. Okay? It's going to be time boxed to about 7 or 8 minutes, just as an introduction. Rules. Number 1, judge's decision is final. Right? Number 2, please play by the spirit of the game. If there's a token and you put that token inside a string, right, then we'll see that in the review, and I'm afraid it won't count. The scorer doesn't see that, it's not that sophisticated, but we will see it. So each token has to be an actual token as it exists in the language. Okay? Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to set it up now. So if you all now make a note of this hex ID. Yeah. And then, once you've made a note of that, if you go to the home page, Cyber-dojo, the one that we're running, our particular IP address, which starts 35, yeah? And then click Enter a Practice Session, the second button down. Do not click the top button. And then when you're there, type in this hex ID, the button should light up then, and then click Start Programming, and you'll be assigned an animal. Yeah.
Terry, you want to comment as well? Terry,
yeah, pairing for this. Pairing for this. refresh button, just to make sure things are working properly. Yeah, and if you look at the output carefully, it will help you add code. Yeah. Okay, everyone, time is up. So as my good friend Kevin says, put the mouse down and step away from the keyboard. Yeah? Some of you may be tempted to carry on. I can see hands on keyboard still. We have finished now. While you've been coding away, the dashboard has been continually updating. So you might want to have a quick look at this. I'll just turn off the refresh now that everyone's hopefully stopped. You know which animal you are. Obviously you can look and find your animal. What you see for each row is what you will see at the top of your screen. But this has time added. So each vertical column is 1 minute. Yeah? Just to quickly tell you what this means over here. Let's look at the sharks, for example. The 10 means that they hit the test button 10 times. The 10 is in green, which means their most recent test was green. This is a pie chart giving you the rough percentages of red, ambers and greens, and this is just a chart. Okay? So, the reason I built this tool, one of the reasons I built this tool, the main reason I built this tool was so that we can do reviews. So this is the crabs, and as I do the review, I'm going to assume that each animal wants their most recent green. If you have an earlier green that has a higher score, just tell me, okay? Yeah? So the crabs have a score of 195. Could I ask you to just keep a record of this? Thanks. So the crabs are the current leaders, but we've only seen one team so far. So we can have a quick look at what they did. And basically, a lot of you may not have known Java at all. So there was some rapid learning potentially going on here, right? And one of the things you might have done was look at the scoring. Rather than just dive straight in, even though you only had a few minutes, it probably would have been a wise thing to look at the scoring and see that there's a rather large completion bonus for using all the tokens. And it's noticeable that they have used all the tokens, we hope. We'll check the code in a minute. And therefore they get the completion bonus. So, if we were doing this on with repetition, we'd have round 2 and round 3 and round 4, and then the winners would be the winners with the highest overall score. And you can learn techniques, strange Java techniques, by looking at the code that they've actually written. Yeah, so strict FP, for example, I suspect there was quite a lot of Googling going on to find out what that meant. Yeah. There's some interesting layout as well. But that's the current leader, so thank you for that, crabs. Next animal, it's alphabetical, is the flamingos. Ooh, 209. So noticeably smaller piece of code, nicely formatted, thank you. Anyone see any ways that they might be able to reduce the size of this program?
Could you remove the parameter and then replace object with maybe bool array?
This one here.
So remove that already.
Then you wouldn't have square brackets.
But then replace on line 29, replace object with bool array with a capital B.
Nice idea. If you try it, what do you think will happen?
The assert will fail.
Correct, because the compiler will say that's crazy thing to say because of, there's no inheritance in arrays. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice idea though. What about the name of the class?
We tried renaming it to C.
Right.
Wouldn't
My understanding is as long as you don't make this a public class, then the name of the class does not have to correspond to the name of the file. And this doesn't have public. Right. So this could be C, like you suggest, right? What could you then do?
You could use the class as the instance of.
Correct, we can put C here. So there's plenty of scope for smaller programs, right? But that's the current leader. Nice one, Flamingos. This is the, I'm not quite sure what that is. Leopard, maybe? Oh, I don't need to hit that, sorry. Hello, computer. Thank you. So they score -22. That's what you get, you know, just for starting. So probably a group that didn't have any Java experience. Also, a couple of groups struggled to connect to the Wi-Fi. So it's not about who won, you know, and anything like that. It's just a bit of fun. Peacocks. -16. Didn't get the completion bonus because these two are missing. Let's have a quick look at the code. Public. Oh, so wasteful. This is very common for a first time of using this, doing this exercise, this crazy exercise. In fact, a couple of groups actually asked me this as I was going around. Does it have to run? No. The program doesn't have to run. It simply has to compile. Okay? So you don't need a main. You don't need any parameters necessarily for main, etc., etc. You don't need the stats. You don't need the public. Yeah. These are all skills that we're trying to cultivate here that are just not normal skills, right? So thank you for that, peacocks. Raccoons. 26. Nicely laid out. We could get rid of the int to make it void, and that would enable us to get rid of return 0, for example. Thank you for that, raccoons. This is the sharks. 200. Ooh. So main could have been renamed. That's one. Float, very, very verbose. Int, please, you know. And this actually makes me think that my previous intuition was wrong. I'm not a Java expert. It seems you can do an assert. But this is because A is of type float. Yes, okay. So that's a strange one, isn't it? Is the type of that variable the same as the type of itself? Well, it kind of is, but apparently you can do that. I didn't know that. Thank you for that, sharks. 18. Yeah, some good stuff going on here. Ooh. Swans. -99. Yeah. It is a crazy, crazy game. It's just, you know, skills you're never going to need. It's just to get used to the environment. Toucans. -109. Cool. And back to the crabs, which means we've done everyone. And so the winner is Flamingos. So Flamingos, could you tell us what your basic strategy was? Where are you? Who's Flamingos? Where?
So it was when we discovered that we could use the assert as the sole statement in the
Right.
and that you could do away with putting in modifiers because default modifiers internal.
Right.
And name it, but we missed out on naming the class because we thought that
There doesn't have to be. That's a bit just setting the requirements, right? So how does the score work? How can it be done?
Right. Yeah. There's a number of ways of playing this. Essentially, because the completion bonus is so high, the best strategy seems, empirically from having done this a few times, is just to get something that has all the keywords, the required tokens in it, and then try and whittle it down. That tends to be the most effective strategy. Okay? which is interesting. Okay, so that was just the warm-up. And one of the things I hope you appreciated from that was the rapid feedback. Yeah, that ties into the definition of unit test. We could talk a lot about that. The unit doesn't mean anything to do with size, it's to do with speed. You can have a large test that's a unit test, as long as it runs very fast and doesn't touch, quote, externals. You're capable of getting fast feedback. And I urge you to use that idea of fast feedback as we do the session. Okay, so now we're going to go sort of back to mainstream. Most people use C#, so let's use that, but it's the same. And we're going to do FizzBuzz. So there's the hex ID, again, from the home page, middle button. Type in that hex ID, start programming. And just as a suggestion, given that you're in 2s or 3s, you might want to change the typist. If I was in a pair and I had no chance to type during the entire session, I might get a bit pissed off. Okay? Any questions, just ask. We've got a few minutes before we officially start again. But most of you are back. So we could just do a quick ad hoc session. Anyone got any questions about anything, for example? Well, it depends what you want to learn. Now that's a great comment. I don't know if everyone heard that comment. I've done many of these sessions, and something I've picked up quite strongly is exactly what's your name? Alex said, and that was a good way to increase your chances of learning is to pair with someone who you don't know. So one thing I noticed when I came in the room was that you 6 gentlemen were already in the room sitting down. I'm guessing you work together. Okay? So this is a known phenomenon in psychology. It's called locking. Basically, a human being will naturally do things that are comfortable for them. And with no malice, lots of things lock to reinforce that. Okay, so one for example of that, so just off the top of my head, is are the tools that you use set up to help you work in pairs or individually? Think about when you do a Git commit. How many users are associated with that Git commit? The answer is 1. You want to try and persuade Git to accept 2 usernames when you do a Git. Good luck, you're going to have to struggle with that bit, okay? Lots and lots of things are locking to reinforce the fact that you use the keyboard that you're used to, you use the Visual Studio or the editor that you're used to, someone else uses a different editor. This is a bad or a good thing, but that by itself is a hindrance to you working together because you're using different editors, for example, okay? So one of the things we will be doing in the next iteration, after we've done a review, is I will be suggesting, how can I enforce it? I will be suggesting that you swap the pairs precisely for that reason. Okay? Learning is a little bit, an important part of learning is that you have some level of discomfort. Right? The teams that I visit on my travels are a consultant. Sometimes people get the wrong idea. They think, oh, what was the best thing you ever visited? And they have this idea that the best thing I've ever visited, everything was peaceful and tremendous and they were doing great work. Just off the cuff, it just came out of the fingertips like this. Not at all, okay? The best teams that I visit have this real tension because that is the sign of the progress. The difficulty that you experience as a team is one of the signs, hopefully, that you're making progress. Of course, you can be experiencing difficulty for different reasons, which is important, yeah, but being slightly uncomfortable is a sign that you're in a good place to hopefully do some learning. Which is partly why we do this in this crazy environment. I've done sessions many years ago when I did training, and if you use Visual Studio, then that's what we used. And if you use Eclipse, then that's what we used. And what I found very quickly was it very strongly affects the way that you think. Because when you use Eclipse, for example, you're thinking about finishing something. You're geared up, like I said in my intro, to production, finishing something with speed, optimizing finishing and not the learning for you. So one of the things I deliberately do is not use anything that remotely hopefully looks like a professional development environment. Yeah? Any other quick questions?
Did you do that all the time for running compilers actually?
Oh no. The compilers are all open source compilers. You just have to figure out the correct incantations in your Docker file to create the image, or some of us. Okay, like I said, my friend Phil did from the JetBrains store did Swift just recently. Okay, that takes us to 1:15. So let's do the review. Now, again, like I said, this is one of the main reasons I built this tool was so that we can do the review. So let's turn off the refresh and just have a quick look. So this was when we took the break here. Some teams have carried on, that's fine. Let's just turn off the minute column so that we can get an overall picture, collapsing the time. And this is pretty healthy, I have to say. Everyone is at least at red or green, which is a good sign. Yeah. There's quite a wide variety in the number of traffic lights. The toucans really embrace this idea of fast feedback. They hit the test button 34 times. Yeah. Whereas the foxes, only 4. Okay. And other things that are noticeable, potentially, the antelopes and toucans have quite a large number of ambers. This is an impressive number of ambers here. So again, off the top of my head, without looking at the code, this would suggest potentially that the toucans maybe aren't familiar with the language in question, okay, which is fine. You can't tell without looking. Okay, so let's have a look. But before we do this, an important part of this review is that as we go through and you see code, sometimes it will be your code from the animal you're in, okay? Lots of times it will be another animal. It doesn't matter. If you see anything that takes your fancy of something you'd like to try in the next iteration, then that is the point of the day. So what I'd urge you to do now is get a pen and paper in your pairs. Just you need one pen and one paper in your pairs. Just to be ready. And as we go through, if you see something, or I comment on something, however it happens, the idea is to find a few things, the things you'd like to practice and do better on when we do the second iteration. That is the purpose of the day, right? Is that clear? If you see something that takes your fancy, and you want to practice it in the next iteration, because we're going to do FizzBuzz again shortly after this review, then make a note of it. It's about making a note of it so that you don't forget, right? So let's have a look. Now there's kind of 2 ways we can do the review here. We could literally go through step by step by step. So if we pick on the butterflies there, this is where they started. This is just the starting files. The first thing they did was change the name of the file, which is a good idea, both in the code and the tests. That got them to amber, because presumably this is still hiker here. And they changed that. And that got them to red, which is as we'd expect. And then they started writing some tests, which is good. Notice there's no code yet. They genuinely tried to write some tests first, which is good. Yeah, sometimes this is a stumbling block. For me, this was a stumbling block many years ago, because I would think, well, I can't write this code yet, because it can't even, there's no chance of compiling because there's no code behind it. It doesn't matter. Okay? We're just getting the idea of some kind of API. So already from this, we've got something that we can try and we can look at and think about. And off the top of my head, the first thing I see here is, how can we have a function that returns integers or strings? Right? But that's partly why you write the code, to see what you were thinking and then see that you weren't thinking quite as clearly as you thought you were thinking, right? Okay? That's the nature of development. That's why we call it development, because your understanding develops, right? So then they started writing some code. They put this in fairly quickly, maybe, and they started writing some code, but they're going to have to come back to that. Now, I'm not going to go through every single step, because we haven't got time, okay? But if you're using this tool, or you spin your own server, which is very, very easy, then this is something you might want to do sometimes. It's up to you, okay? Let's skip forward to the screen. Let's see if the tests, tests are still the same, except they've changed the integers to strings, so that's looking good. Any comments about this test?
Nobody's saying what it does.
Doesn't tell us what it does, correct. A useful way of thinking about this that someone showed me was the idea of looking for duplication. And I found this a really good tip personally. The idea is you sort of look at the code but turn off the compiler that's in your brain and just physically look for duplication as if you had a kind of a regex that was really honed in on looking for duplication, right? And one of the things you'd see is that we've got the word test here between square brackets, which is an annotation, and we've got the word test here. And therefore we can remove that word test there, because it isn't actually doing anything that you can't discern from other bits of the code. And whenever you have this duplication, it's a sign that there's a potential missing abstraction. So I'm sure shortly we'll see other animals that have got a different approach for the name of this test. Okay? But equally, it's hard to judge yet, because we're only early on. No reason, sometimes to start with a name that you know is a rubbish name, but you have a to-do list, and on that, you know you're going to have to change that later on. Okay? Occasionally it takes your choice. So let's skip right ahead, see what we end up with. Okay, so I must confess I'm now burning a few calories at the front here, trying to figure out this. And there's nothing in the name of the test that helps me. So again, I'm not going to spend a long time on that because as much as anything I want to see all of the animals so that we can compare and contrast. Here is the crabs. Again, I'm going to skip right to the end. Let's turn off the diff so we can actually see their final piece of code. So here's their tests. What a contrast. So even though the strong notation in regular C# is to use some kind of camel case, Pascal case, it's noticeable here that they're using underscores for the name of the test. That's becoming more and more common. There's a couple of people who've done experiments on that show long identifier names are parsed by the human brain more rapidly if you use underscores. So I don't have a problem with the different styles that is suggesting. The idea that the test code and the code are always the same is not a good idea. They have to respond to different tensions. Okay? We can also see that the name of the test is what I would say is it definitely asserts something. It's a propositional form of writing the name of the test. Yeah? When you do this happens. Multiples of 5 turn into buzz. You might want to think about the word turn into. Yeah, you can play around with the words. If you're like most programmers, you do the best you can, and after you've looked at it for a while, a better name suggests itself, and that's just completely normal, right? Okay? So, in contrast, no calories need to be burned from me to read that. Okay? Let's have a quick look at the code, although I have to say I'm not particularly interested in the code. Yep. There's all kinds of ways you could change that, but that seems perfectly acceptable to me. This isn't going to be run, but if you were actually doing the problem as specified in the instructions, you would at some point have to do that main to actually print them out. And that's an important question about when you write a unit test, you're deciding what you're testing and what you're not testing. Yeah? So thank you for that, crabs. Next animal is the antelope. First number is 1. Interesting, completely different approach. They've decided, clearly they've gone from a sort of a top-down approach. If we run main, as it were, yeah, and it generates the correct output, hopefully, and that just goes straight into the output stream, how can we get hold of that output stream so that we can test that it is what we think it is? There's some attempt here to do exactly that. Yeah? So again, there's no right or wrong. Big part of using Cyber-dojo is that you see the different styles and approaches that different people have. Yeah? This is very much a top-down approach, whereas before we saw a sort of very much a bottom-up approach. Yeah? But this strictly wouldn't be a unit test because it is crossing an external boundary. Okay? You might want both of them. If you really wanted both of them, you could have both of them. That wouldn't be a problem. They just got it to green in time, which is good. But they've done all the work on the scaffolding. So it's clear what's going to happen. They're going to have to pass some arguments in here, which presumably represent a half-open range or something like that, and they're going to get the output.
John,
Yeah.
would you just elaborate on why you said that would be not a unit test? And it wasn't my question, I just thought something might be, you said
Right.
across the boundaries, I thought
Right.
that might be a throwaway comment for some people.
The idea with the unit test is that you want two things. You want the test to be deterministic and you want it to be fast. It turns out you get both of those things if the outcome of the test depends only on the code and the test code. Right? In other words, if you can imagine a scenario when you run the tests and it passes, and then you don't change the tests or the code, and you rerun the test and now it fails, then by definition you must have had an external dependency. You might not have realised it, you probably don't realise it, but you must have done by definition. So in this case what could happen, it's in the test of course, but the output stream is the output stream. So when we call the program, we could be redirecting the output stream to a file on the hard disk. And the hard disk could be full. Or even if it's not full, we could be running the program as a user who doesn't have the rights to write to that particular part of the hard disk. Okay? And then potentially, or some other way, there's lots of ways it could happen, but the test would fail because you're not actually testing what you thought you were testing. Right? So as I said, a big part of this idea of a unit is you decide this is the unit, and therefore there's my boundary around it. And if ordinarily the code would cross that boundary, you have to in some way fake or want the stub to not cross the boundary so that you are in control. Yeah? And you do hopefully get nearer and nearer to this ideal that the outcome of the tests depend solely on the code and the test and the test.
I think
Right?
why I asked you that question is that was a eureka moment for myself.
Right. Yeah. You get it's such a win-win situation because you get the deterministic behaviour. You don't get flickering tests. What happens to flickering tests? They get deleted or ignored or commented out. Not much use in them, right? Okay. Yeah. But if once they're not flickering, how fast do they run? Given that you're not crossing an external boundary, I mean, you'd have to be doing some pretty serious, deep algorithmic work for it to take any length of time at all. Right?
John, maybe so some time ago, I think an approach was actually where directly the output of the program and having that and making a session on this stuff.
Right.
But there's another interesting dependency that maybe you didn't realize, which is either related to that one, that the test is dependency on the test framework, which also puts the same on the output. So if you now start redirecting the output, you're also redirecting the output of the test framework, and then
Right.
they all get things together.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that can happen. Yeah. It's easy to say we want the code to do one thing and one thing only. And part of this idea of test-driven development and the idea of a unit test is it forces you to think about the coupling of the code. You want to write the test that code and not this code. But when you test this code, you're also running this code over here. Well, you didn't want to do that, but you're doing it. That's a sign. The coupling isn't where you want the coupling to be, right? Okay? Because you can want what you want. Yeah. You might not get what you want, but you can want what you want. Okay, foxes. So nice contrast, nice name, but not using the underscores. So you might just mentally in your head like to feel the difference apart from anything else when the underscores aren't there. Can you feel yourself mentally inserting them? Yeah. Get fizzbuzz 3. 3 is an exact multiple of 3. Yep, so this is good and on the way. And this is what you'd expect. It's a slimy code, but that's just a normal technique when you're on the way. Jellyfish. So a couple of things that we've covered already. The word test can be deleted here and we don't lose anything. In actual fact, we gain. We probably don't want the word print here. I think we've been led into the idea of printing because it talks about printing in the instructions there. But there is no printing going on here, unless there's some side effect. But again, that's not the intention, clearly. The other thing that strikes me is the word answer. Yeah, that's just a leftover from the default starting files. Yeah, I have a number of words in my head that I've collected over the years when I'm looking at code, identifiers that what I call content-free identifiers. Right? They don't actually provide any information at all. This is, again, not very many calories needed to be burned there at all. And again, this is perfectly reasonable, given that we haven't finished yet. And so we're not catering for the FizzBuzz case yet, but we haven't got the test for that yet, so that's fine. Howl, the owls. Any comments about this? I kind of agree because of lines 10 and line 16, right? So those comments are actually negative value because they aren't actually the simple example to start you off. Again, you have to read them and then discard them, or think you have to discard them. Again, Kevin has a nice phrase for this. He calls it remove to improve. It's a really powerful thing. One of the things I wasn't anticipating, but I found it really useful, was when I build Cyber-dojo, I really try hard to do proper test-driven development. And one of the things I measure is my code coverage, and I keep it at 100% all the time, which is easy to do if you start at 100%. It's not easy to reach 100%, but it's easy to start. And one of the most valuable things that I hadn't anticipated was it shows me dead code. Right? I can just delete that code, all the tests pass, everything passes, and I've still got 100%. Clearly, nothing was using that code. And the number of times I've found dead code, because otherwise I was just slightly below 100%, yeah, it just blows my mind. I think for all the times that I've previously coded in code bases, you know, for a regular 9-to-5 job, before I went solo, and I think about all that dead code, it must be littering in there, right? Yeah. If you want a nice example of that, for some definition of nice, you might want to Google for night trading, night with a K. Yeah, there's an interesting story there about a company that left dead code in their code base, and they went bust because of it, very spectacularly. Peacocks. Great, nice. So we've said the comment about the comment. Yeah. Really, you want to be careful about copy-paste. Whenever you're doing a copy-paste, it's fine to sometimes do copy-paste, but I would urge you to try and gain the awareness that when you're doing a copy-paste, just think and say to yourself mentally, I'm doing a copy-paste now. Okay? And that will hopefully jolt you sometimes to more awareness, and you can see things that you didn't see otherwise. So the second number is 2. Well, that is true, right? I don't have to look at the body of the test. The second number is 2, right? Yeah? That's the way I read that. Completely different API. Completely different API, which is very interesting. Not unusual to see this. And again, top down, bottom up, there's no right way of doing this. But most dominantly, hopefully, that you see from this, is that the names of these tests do not reflect the specification. Yeah? Previously we saw, for example, I think it was with charts, was it? The name of this test would be numbers exactly divisible by 3 fizz. Right? And you don't have to guess why this is fizz here, for example. Given that this isn't actually 3, it's 2, but it's based on 0, etc., etc., right? Okay? Think about the calories that have to be burned by the poor reader reading it, which will be you in 3 weeks' time, right? The rabbits. Given 3, return fizz. Yep, 3, fizz. So again, this is content-free test name. Mongoose. Love it. Check. Again, I would say that's pretty much a content-free word. Without something added to it, we're going to struggle a bit. This is on the way. Yep. But again, check is one of the words in my list. Thank you for that, rabbits. This is the toucans, who had quite a lot of ambers. Very similar. 1 is 1. Can't argue with that. Copy paste again. In my mind, I have to indent that. I just can't help it. I'm indenting it. Something else that's a little thing here, but these little things add up, is given that my var is only used once, yeah, we could replace the use of my var there, and instead just put in that whole expression without the semicolon. Okay, and I would argue that's actually more direct. It's easier to understand. It's not necessarily something you do in regular code, but in test code, you do, I would suggest, want this idea that it reads linearly. And you don't, for example, have to almost kind of do an algebraic substitution. Because if you think about it, that's kind of what's happening here, yeah? Sometimes you might have duplication in the test precisely because you don't want that kind of algebraic substitution to happen. Yeah? Let's have a quick look at the code. Remember, write things down if you see things that catch your eye. Answer again. Doesn't mean anything. Tuna. Tests. So again, this is a very common first approach, particularly if you're not used to the language, for example. It does say quite clearly in the instructions that you have to print stuff. You have to print stuff, and so stuff is being printed. Right? But I guess one of the points here is that if I was a customer coming to Chris, for example, and I was giving him a spec saying this is what it has to do from my perspective on the outside when I look at the code, I might not say in my spec, oh, and you have to write some tests. Right? Because at some level, I'm just assuming you're going to do a professional job and write the tests. So the same thing I would suggest is happening here. You do have to ultimately, if you're actually finishing this, do some printing. Yeah? That's not really why we're here. Why we're here is to do TDD. Think about TDD. Play around with ideas. Try stuff. Quick look at the code. Wow! Well, I'm afraid I am not going to burn any calories and read that. And now we're back to the butterflies. Okay? So any questions about anything from that? Plenty to get your teeth into there. Yeah? And if you think you did a really damn fine job, and you haven't got much on your list of things as improvements for the next iteration, I can quite easily suggest some things for you. For example, if we look at this, and we look at the pie charts, there's quite a large number of ambers. Yeah, so one of the things I do as a practice session is I do it literally the same exercise again and again and again, with the intention of having no ambers. Yeah, that's a useful constraint that you can add. There's always things you can do. Okay, so we're going to do the second iteration in a moment. I'll set it up and give you the hex ID. But first, I'd like you to swap partners. I suggest you do this across tables. Okay? Again, just a suggestion. You don't have to do it, but I strongly recommend you swap partners. Okay, everyone? So I'm going to give you the new hex ID in a moment. Before we go, a couple of important points. Number one, try and keep in mind the list that you're going to have to agree with your new partner. What are the things you'd like to improve on? Okay, just pick one or two things, specific things that you as a pair or three would like to improve on. Okay? Just spend a minute now chatting with your partner. Okay? Yeah. So hopefully you come to some rough agreement on what it is you want to practice. Now I'm going to add an extra little twist, yeah, as well as trying to focus on the practice that you're doing. First things first, let's be clear what we're doing. Sometimes people misunderstand the intention, and when they start again, the first thing they do is copy some code from some previous iteration or some previous traffic light. That isn't the suggestion, okay? The deliberate idea is that you start again from scratch, okay? Also, if you actually do copy-paste, you might run into trouble because you get hidden characters. There are row characters in text areas, and you can end up with very strange compiler messages for things that don't actually appear, okay? So I wouldn't do that. So do go slow, type it in from the beginning, that is deliberate. Remember the things you're practicing. Okay, and the extra twist is, I'd like you to keep a little pen and paper next to you, and before you press the test button, you have to say whether you're going to get a red, an amber, or a green. Right? And and write that down, and then you hit the test button, and then you record what you've actually got, and you put a tick if what you said you got was what you got, and you put a cross if you didn't get what you said you got. And there'll be the prize of being the team.
Per pair or individually?
No, per pair, always per pair. Okay, so in the pairs, predict what you're going to get, write it down, press the test button, write down what you got, and then tick or a cross. And what you're looking for is all ticks. What you're looking for is all ticks. Okay? See if anyone can do it with all ticks. So here's your hex ID. Off you go again. James's end note is going to start at 5 past. We need a couple of minutes just to do a review. So if we can all stop now, look at the front. Here's the dashboard. And the eagles have no ambers. The porcupines have no ambers. And the tuners have no But that isn't necessarily what you were aiming for. So look at your list. Yeah? How many ticks and how many crosses? So did anyone get 100% ticks? Yeah? Fantastic. Fantastic. Because you can quite legitimately say this is going to be an amber, right? And they get an amber. That's a very, very good tactic. James actually mentioned that in 2 of his slides, if you watch them carefully, when he was doing some of his stuff. Okay. So let's have a quick look. So this is the dolphins. That's interesting. Numbers that are not multiples of 3 or 5 don't change. Never seen it expressed that way before, but I like that. Before I've seen people say things like are themselves or something like that. Okay, but that's perfectly good. I like that.
We had a massive argument about it. I'm overplaying that.
Yeah.
It took us a while to come to that.
We've been about 5 iterations. So.
Okay. I must confess I'm burning some calories here. Because we've got 2 numbers being passed in. I'm not quite sure what the 100 is doing. So I'm going to have to look inside. Okay, it seems to me like this min and max is something that might make it into a test later on, but at the moment hasn't made it into a test later. So a few calories burned there, a few bits of code that didn't have any tests, but nothing wrong with that sometimes. This is the gorillas. Here's the code. So again, the names of the tests are what I call parrot names. They parrot the body of the method. But again, the gorillas might have been focusing on something different to that, which is fine. Only they know what they were focusing on. Yeah, that's what you'd expect. This is work in progress, that's fine. This is the kingfishers. I mentioned one of the things that I found a valuable skill was looking at the code, turning the compiler off, just looking for duplication, right? So as you get, as you refine your understanding, you practice more and more, you have to look harder to see the duplication. We haven't got the word test repeated in the name of it, for example. But we've got fizzbuzz here, and we've also got fizzbuzz here. Okay? So it's not necessarily good or bad. The first step is just to learn to see it. Okay? When you see it, then you can make a judgment about whether it's telling you anything. Okay? And an idea that pops into my head, for a reason I'll tell you in a minute, is that we can get rid of the fizzbuzz here, and this just becomes get. If we make it get, and then we pass in a 3, yeah, then the reason that popped into my head was because I saw a group doing fizzbuzz a while ago now, and they sort of created the idea that fizzbuzz was a container. Think of fizzbuzz as a container, yeah, and you're passing in the 3 as an index for that value. It has quite a nice feel to it, and yet becomes a part of a sort of standard API that you'd use if it was a container. So I thought that was quite a nice idea. And there's a number of ways you might have got to that, but one way might simply have been just a duplication. Really valuable skill, I find. That's the kingfishers? Crabs? No. What is that? Lobster? Any comments about this? Yeah.
You're not testing the base case of a number.
Sure, we run out of time. Who knows what they'd have done later? Just on what we've got. The one word really that catches my eye is if. Right? I would urge you to rephrase it in terms of, like I say, a proposition. You're making a very definite proposition. Okay? It's not all if in the if sense of code, because an if can be true and it can be false, and you have to look in the body of the code and see which one it is.
When
Okay? Something, exactly. Some alternative wording. Okay? But again, words that ring a bell in my head that sometimes are content-free in certain situations, and if in the name of the test is definitely one just to watch out for. Okay? Part and blah is, I'm assuming, going to be changed later. Yep, all good stuff. If you're being picky, you could say that the fizz here is a lowercase f and it's an uppercase f here. Yep. An interesting one to think about is whether you want to write the word 3 there as T-H-R-E-E or actually use the digit 3. Yeah, lots and lots of small things, but these small things all add up.
Can I just ask something about the general naming? Well, this one's different.
Of course.
The general naming of most of the tests that we've seen so far, where it says multiple of 3,
Yeah.
but actually the test is only testing the value 3.
Yeah, that's true.
Agreed.
That's happening all the way through, including one that we did, so I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I would probably throw that to
Disagree here, but
Exactly.
the test doesn't actually name the test.
I don't disagree. Yeah, if it was me, I would probably have at least 2 assertions in here that were both of them hopefully multiples of 3, but not also multiples of 5, etc., etc. Yeah.
2 assertions, are they good though?
Yes, I think it's fine. There is this idea that some you sometimes get is that each test should have one and only one assertion, and I kind of agree with that in the logical sense. Okay, but in the physical sense, you do what you need to do to get enough confidence. It's about how much confidence you have and how much time you've got and whether it's worth spending the time doing this or whether it's worth doing it somewhere else.
So how would in the context of this, how many asserts are good asserts? Do you assert every number in that 1 to 100? That should be.
Well, in this case you could, but again, if you think about actually not doing that, but mentally doing that, but again, think about how much confidence would you gain if you had 3, 6 and 9, for example, and then you put another one for 12. Do you actually think that you're gaining more coverage in terms of coverage by putting the 12 in that you haven't got from the 3, 6 and the 9? At some point you have to say, well, no, I'm not really getting any more confidence.
Isn't that dependent on your implementation? If it was a constant list of numbers, then that would break. That would be quite fragile compared to something that was using.
I don't disagree. There's no right or wrong answer. It literally is a judgment call that you feel partly in your head and partly in your gut about how much code you've got and how much test you've got and how much confidence you've got and whether you want to use the time that you've got here or somewhere else. Right?
One of the hard things I find is the edge cases.
Right.
How do you cater for edge cases? So our edge cases there are -1, 100,
Right.
and random multiples in between.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you cover that without having a test for each one?
How would you feel about falling over the assert?
Yeah, well, that's what I would have done. We do that.
I would be hesitant, partly because one of the very strong rules I have is that the test code should be much, much simpler than the code under test.
Right. Because then you
Right.
can choose bugs.
Absolutely. You don't want the tests to be more complicated than the code, because you've got more bugs in the tests than you've got in the code. Right? Okay. So sometimes, yeah, it depends. Be patient when you take your choice. There's no one universal right answer. This is very much a data-driven style of testing. If we did a different exercise, we'd probably end up with a different one. We should probably call it a wrap-up here, because James is going to start literally in 1 minute. Okay. So apologies if we haven't seen your animal. If you want to stay and see your animal, I'm sure you don't necessarily want to, but last thing, I'll keep a record of the hex IDs. Okay, if you want to email me because you want to look back at any of this code at any point, that's absolutely fine. I'll give you the hex IDs. Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers.